Live. Today, we are having a little look at our third and fourth keys to well-being, adopting an open and positive mindset and embracing acceptance and letting go. If this is the first time that you've tuned into one of these lives that we do, just a quick recap on what we like to do. Myself and Neil today are going to be bringing to you a live discussion on a common well-being topic. And for the next half hour or so, it is your opportunity to gain some awareness, to contribute to conversation, to ask any questions that you might have. And ultimately, our aim right now is to bring a little bit of awareness and to give you that opportunity to destigmatize mental health and take something away, whether that is for yourself or anybody else. So to introduce myself, my name is Charlie. I'm a wellbeing coach here at Seropia, and what that means for me is that over the last 3 years or so, I've spent a lot of my time supporting members, delivering workshops, examining the topics that we like to talk about day in, day out. And today, I want to share some of that knowledge with you.
And my name's Neil. I'm a wellbeing coach here at Seropia, and very much the same as Charlie. I'm currently running workshops, and I'm always investigating kind of reasons why I struggle with my mental health, and I'm learning all the way through. So, we do these lives based on the fact that we've kind of understood some things that can have a massive, massive impact on our mental well-being.
Absolutely. Really important point to make there, Neil, as well. You are talking to two people who, in their own rights, have managed mental health from the past, and something that we're really passionate about doing is sharing that knowledge and creating really positive solution-focused discussions around it. So, on with the live topic that we've got today. Today, we are looking at keys 3 and keys 4 of our 5-key model to well-being. And in particular, we're having a look at the importance of embracing acceptance and letting go in your life, and also adopting an open and positive mindset. With the other lives that we've been doing around the gift, we've made sure to separate them, that our feeling is that these two are really closely interlinked. And I would imagine that as we go through this live, you're going to have some realizations as to why that is. But let us start with key 3, embracing acceptance and letting go. What does it mean? It's kind of a multifaceted concept, but embracing acceptance and letting go ultimately speaks about letting go of the past. When we find ourselves unwell, we can spend an awful lot of time locked into old unhelpful stories, locked into old patterns of thought and behavior that ultimately steal our present and future from us. But it's a little bit beyond that as well. I don't know about yourself, Neil, but when I was struggling with embracing acceptance and letting go, I find myself getting emotional quite a lot of the time and really struggling to process and move that so I could get back to a place where I was just feeling content. Does that ring true for you?
It certainly does. And I felt, Charlie, when I was doing this, that this was probably the toughest thing that I had to kind of negotiate, a bit like yourself, because you're stuck in a mindset that you've been stuck in for probably many, many years, to then just kind of start investigating, accepting things, and I'm not trying to steal this, but sometimes you just have to accept that situations you might have had during your life may well have gone wrong. They may well have kind of caused different kind of coping mechanisms, but sometimes we can find ourselves stuck, keep going back. It's almost like we're just playing the same old story time and time again.
Absolutely.
So then when I started to do a little bit of work around this, I kind of realized that some of the stuff that's happened to me, and like many other people, you have to just accept, because you're not living in the present moment. You're just playing the same old story, and you kind of get stuck. And Charlie and I will quite often talk about, we've got to make sure that we're living in the moment. Because I don't know how you felt, but when I did a bit of work, I kind of realized that my future was based on my past, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And it was stealing away my future, because I couldn't create my own future, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, Neil. And I really quite like that, because the concept of acceptance, so the word acceptance literally means taking what is on offer. And a lot of the time when we're finding ourselves poorly, a non-acceptance of our reality, the way our past might have affected us, is actually in itself powerful enough just to steal that future, like you're saying. No ability to plan, it can feel like really struggling to access and enjoy the present moment. And that in itself is a huge component for why people can stay unwell. The fourth key that we're going to be looking at as well today, adopt an open and positive mindset. And this one is a little bit different to embrace acceptance and letting go. And it's all about examining the role that our thoughts can play in dictating our feelings and actions. When we're not adopting an open and positive mindset, it might look like a closed negative mindset. We might be seeing doom and gloom all about us. We might not be able to, uh, see things in a more realistic, positive light. I'll give you a little bit of an example. If I had a bad job interview, okay, well, I'm using the word bad, but if I had a job interview where I wasn't successful, there would be two different ways of looking at it. One, I would be adopting a closed negative mindset. It didn't go well. I'm a failure. I didn't do well enough at that. It means that I'm not worthwhile. An open and positive mindset might look like this wasn't the right job for me. It wasn't the right time. Maybe they found a better candidate. And depending on the way that we interpret things, it makes a huge, huge difference to the way that we feel in any given moment. So that's kind of my interpretation of adopting an open and positive mindset. What does it mean for you, Neil?
Well, you kind of encapsulated it really. There's lots of situations that I found myself in where I can kind of just have a situation. I'm going to just use something that happened to me of late. I coach my football team, my children's
Yes, you
football
do.
team. And when we've had a particularly not so good season, a poor season to be fair, and before I even started every game, I was in the mindset of we're going to lose again. We're going to lose again. I kind of felt that that was being kind of instilled into the team as well. So my team then started to feel that we're going to go out and we're going to get beaten. I opened my mind up and then started to talk a bit more passionately and a bit more kind of self-care to myself, saying, okay, we're going to go out and we'll do our very best. And the way, even if we did lose, I would come away and say, well, maybe that was just learning. I need to just change things around and off we go again.
Yeah, that's it. And it's that can-do attitude as well. But
Yeah.
what you're describing there is with a negative mindset as well, it can lead to self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yes.
Unfortunately, not always the positive kind. If you carry around really fixed beliefs that things aren't going to work out for you and you're going to be a failure, you can find yourself accidentally from time to time just taking steps and walking down that path, making your environment a reality of the way that you're thinking. I'm sure that there's a saying around this, and it's not coming to mind, that the way that you think and feel, ultimately, you will surround yourself with that environment. If you're thinking positively, you're full of hope and ambition and the possibility for the future, then you will find that the world around you starts to adapt and to morph to how it is that you're feeling. If you're feeling negative, if you're feeling low, if you're feeling sad, and you stay in that mindset, then ultimately your environment comes to really form around that. I'm sure we've got a couple of examples around that, Neil.
Well, it's interesting what you say because I look at that where you were saying when you have kind of a closed negative mindset, you tend to magnetize to people that have the same kind of mindset. And it's quite interesting because you see it quite regularly in the world. You'll see people that have a positive and an open mindset, and there's always a smile on their faces, and they gravitate towards people that have that same kind of mindset.
Yeah.
So sometimes when we get stuck into that negative closed mindset, we tend to attract people or our environment around our negativity, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And I'm going to share a personal example around that a little bit later on. But for the first time today, before we move on to having a look why it is so important for our mental well-being, we're just going to have a little look at the comments. You can see that nobody's commented at that point. That's absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
If you're watching, if you want to ask any questions, please do. We are very, very happy to have a little look, see anything that you want to share, and we can take it from there. So understanding what these two concepts are. Why are they all so important for our mental well-being? And something that I wanted to touch on today is that our mind can be like a great big time machine. This is a generalization, but a lot of the time, if we're feeling, the clinical word depressed, or we're feeling low in ourselves, we can find that we're spending a lot of time thinking and ruminating on the past, missed opportunities, perceived failures that we have, times that we haven't reached our full potential. And on the same kind of brushstroke, if we're thinking a lot about the future, that in itself can lead to anxiety, or at the very least concern, catastrophizing, where you're anticipating things as that it might happen and you're thinking that they might not necessarily work out. In that essence, one of the really key concepts that we believe can help support mental well-being is to refocus on the present moment. More often than not, if we're able to refocus on exactly what's happening right now, we will find that things actually aren't that bad a lot of the time. Okay, occasionally you might be in a little bit of conflict with a partner or something like that. That there, right there, might be a bad moment, but almost always the present moment is actually just fine. It's kind of good enough. But on the other kind of side of things, so looking at adopting an open and positive mindset, our mindset forms our reality. The beliefs that we carry around our own value and our ability to interact and get what we need from the world in itself shapes our perception and the way that we feel about everything. On that note, if we have genuine beliefs of being unlovable, being a failure, being defective, if we think that there is no opportunity for us to get true joy and happiness from the world, then that is going to affect our present moment. And it's also going to affect our confidence and self-esteem. And this leads us on to what I'm going to say is maybe the highlight for me of the talk that we're going to be having today. And it is a difficult conversation. I think it's worth saying that before we go into it. But if we're not careful, if we are living in the past, not accessing the present moment, we're carrying around unhelpful beliefs about the way that we feel. I'm unlovable, I'm broken. It can lead to a concept that we call victim mentality.
Yeah.
Before we go into some of the signs of victim mentality, I would like to say that really bad things do happen to good people. I am not saying that you don't have every right to feel the way that you do. But what it is that I am saying is that if you recognize yourself in victim mentality, the bit of power that you do have over that is to recognize it, start to address it, and then start to embrace acceptance and letting go, adopting an open and positive mindset so that you can take yourself out of it. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So some of the signs and things that can keep you in victim mentality: self-blame. Just a thought. If you put a lot of blame on yourself, it can be a sign that actually you're staying stuck in that. Another sign of victim mentality would be feeling like you're stuck in a story, that you're day in, day out, you'd be dealing with the same memories, the same feelings, perhaps from a series or events or an event that happened a long time ago. It's almost like you're frozen in time from a moment that something truly awful happened to you, and you're still carrying that with you exactly the same way to this day. I was asking a colleague about victim mentality yesterday just to generate some ideas, and asked her to describe it, and the way that she went about it was woe me. And I thought it was a really interesting way of describing it.
Yeah.
It touches on self-pity, which all of us are entitled to do. We are entitled to have that little bit of self-pity, but it's like an extended version of that.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, Neil, what do you think some of your signs for victim mentality would be?
Well, one of the things that I kind of struggled with for quite a period of time was kind of accepting encouragement and kind of accepting advice. And again, that links, does it not, to the open and positive mindset? Because it was very much a closed mind at that period in time, and people were giving me encouragement and just telling me that I'm doing well in whatever it might be, and I was just dismissing it totally. So that in itself is victim mentality for me. I'm quite interested in something that you said, and something that really did stick with me when I was going through my journey, was what you were just talking about. And it's just a phrase that I want to use because it's just stuck with me. And when we're talking about living in the present moment, that is so very true, because the phrase that I remember so much was history. Yesterday's history. The future is a mystery, but the here and now is the gift that we have. And that's where that just stuck with me. And I thought, okay, I need to do some things around this, because I think that a lot of my future was defined for me on my past experiences.
Yes, it can feel that way.
So that was something that really stuck with me. And then, obviously with victim mentality, I was in certain places where I thought I was just completely stuck. There was situations where I didn't have any boundaries or anything like that, so I was tolerating things that were making me unwell.
It's a huge one.
So I was tolerating abuse and being taken advantage of and all those kinds of things. And in that in itself is victim mentality,
Of course,
because you can't do, or you feel that you can't do anything about it.
That's it. It's almost like a conscious or subconscious refusal for the possibility of change.
Yeah.
I deserve to be treated this way. I can't improve myself. And it could be that you've developed these fixed feelings and beliefs because of bad experiences in the past. There's a concept I want to touch on very briefly called learned helplessness. And for me, it's almost the biggest pitfall that you can have in mental well-being. It speaks of the idea that if you try and do things often and you're often met with failure, you will internalize that there is no possibility that it's ever going to work out for you. And that in itself can be victim mentality as well. Something really, really interesting that I noticed you were saying there, Neil, in particular, is around the refusal of advice as well.
Yeah.
And another concept that we like to talk about here is called contempt prior to investigation. And it's this idea that people can give you advice. You might on the surface go, oh yeah, that's quite a nice idea, actually. I might try that. But inside you're like, no, it's worked for them. Brilliant. It could not possibly work for me. There is only no chance in hell that I'm ever going to even attempt to try that. And that in itself, that refusal for the possibility of change again, keeps us locked in our present issues. Strong word, isn't it, refusal? Because it's not necessarily deliberate, but we can start to recognize that there are things that we're doing to contribute and to keep ourselves there. I want to share my own experience of victim mentality. It took me a little while to recognize it. I'm glad that I had some support and some enlightening moments along the way. But for those of you that are only just meeting me, you wouldn't know that my kind of turnaround of mental health came around 4 years ago. And it came off the back of a relationship that ended really badly for me. And I was supported by Vicky Howarth, who happens to be the CEO of Seropia. She'd see me for 20 minutes, half an hour a week. We'd have a little bit of a chat. It was nice to have someone to listen to. And in those sessions, I distinctly remember saying, society has failed me. There should have been people around me to catch me as I was going into my decline. I have no place in this world. And ultimately, I decided that I wanted to go live in a treehouse. That's genuinely where I got to. And for anyone that knows me, that's completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because I love technology. I hate the cold. There is absolutely no way that I would have actually been good to go living in a treehouse. However, the mentality that I was carrying around at the minute told me that that was my only option, actually, at disconnecting from what I thought were the things that were creating me problems in my life. So for me, there's a long word here, misanthropy. Sorry, I've got to learn to pronounce it, haven't I, if I'm going to say it. But that concept there talks about a general dislike, distaste, hatred of other people as well, which is actually counterintuitive. As humans, we are supposed to be social beings. We're supposed to be connecting with other people. But we can find ourselves accidentally dipping into victim mentality and putting a lot of blame in different places. That was a long-winded example.
Yeah. And, we all look at it differently, obviously working around this kind of thing. That one thing that I kind of look at it as, for me, is sometimes I can self-sabotage.
Yes, huge.
I can self-sabotage by exactly like you've just explained with the treehouse scenario. Self-sabotage is something that I stay mindful about all the time, because there's lots of times where I've been given advice and I can just catch myself now by saying, oh yeah, that's a great idea, and then going away and doing nothing about it. And that for me is self-sabotage, because you're not opening up your opportunities. You're just very much stuck with your own viewpoints.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there are lots of reasons why we might not take on board advice and start to make the change in our lives. Some of it might be that refusal for the possibility of change. Some of it might be, like you're saying, struggling to that self-discipline to take yourself through the steps, and a genuine fear can exist as well about making these steps in our lives. However, the topic of anxiety is not one we're going to be exploring in particular today, because that is a whole 2-hour thing that we could easily talk about. So what we're going to do now, understanding victim mentality and maybe recognizing areas of our lives where it exists, we are going to move on to what can I do to embrace acceptance and letting go. So what, understanding the problem, this is the bottom line of the question, what can I do to start to make changes? So the first thing that we need to be doing, number one, identify signs of victim mentality. Actually just open your mindset to the possibility and the realization that this might be something that touches and affects you. I'd make a pretty strong argument, Neil, I don't know if you'd agree with this, that everybody dips into victim mentality from time to time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the key for me, Charlie, is kind of like you just said, identifying it. Once you've identified that you probably slip towards victim mentality, then that's the time when you can actually take corrective action, which is what we often talk about. We often talk about solution focus. We often talk about maybe opening your mind up, accepting some other concepts. So when we're talking about identifying, I think that's probably one of the key things, is once you start to identify that maybe you're pushing yourself towards victim mentality, then's the time to start taking action.
Yeah, that's exactly it. We need to have a recognition of the issue initially, and then exactly like you said, we can start to take corrective action. But the difficult thing is that if we allow ourselves to consider the possibility that we have even a small part to play in the way that we feel, that realization in itself is going to bring about a whole host of different uncomfortable emotions and feelings. And the thing that we need to do in that moment right there is we need to learn to manage them and to deal with them. Which leads us on nicely to our second top tip for embracing acceptance and letting go. Accept your emotions, let them flow. In any process of change, we need to move from denial, which we're doing if we're recognizing victim mentality, and then we need to allow ourselves to sit in that uncomfortable space, to become accustomed to it to the point where we can then start to take meaningful action. So accepting your emotions talks about tuning in with your body, doing your best to not allow them to dictate the way that you might then go about. Because if you tap into it, self-sabotage can be a thing. For me, I talk about this regularly, but drink and drugs in particular was a way that I used to control not having to go through those feelings. But we need to allow them to sit there, to do an investigation, to understand them. And with that newfound understanding, we will find ourselves in a position where we can take that corrective action, those meaningful steps. And there are a few anagrams that we like to talk about here at Isseropia. Stop, I know, is one that we're a big fan of. But the one I want to talk to you guys about in particular today is called RAIN. RAIN. And unsurprisingly, this is just a little glimpse of some of the stuff that we talk about in our foundation course. But RAIN is a really simple anagram. Sorry, let me pop that on the screen correctly there. RAIN. And this can be a really simple guide for helping us with that process there. R. Recognize what is going on. What is happening inside you? Pause and acknowledge. Allow yourself to feel. Suppress it.
That's quite an interesting one. Don't want to delve in too quickly, but there's a lot of times that I felt where I kind of suppressed that emotion and didn't allow it. It was almost like I was trying to fight that emotion off. And you're quite right in what you say. You have to allow that emotion, and you have to kind of sit with it and work through it. And just a scenario, I remembered quite often when I used to have an emotion of sadness, for argument's sake. But depending where I was, what I was doing, a lot of times I kind of just fought that off. I didn't actually allow my body to become tearful or whatever. I just soaked it in because my thought at that point in time was probably if I allowed and showed that emotion, other people would think that I'm broken or I'm not a man or whatever the case may be. I have learned that emotions, any emotion that you're feeling is a valid emotion, and you have to just kind of sit with it, feel it, and work through it.
Exactly. Start to work it out is the essence of it. Yeah. Absolutely well said there, Neil. Once we've allowed ourselves to feel our thoughts and feeling and allow them to be there, we need to investigate it and investigate it with kindness. That's a huge, huge word there, but so often, especially when we're feeling poorly, we can start to berate ourselves, can't we? Oh, I'm feeling this again. I must be a failure. I'm weird. I'm alien. I don't know why I feel this way. But all of our feelings are valid. You said that yourself, Neil. Yeah. Absolutely spot on. And we need to do a little investigation to understand the source. What is it that you might be unwilling to feel? Are you outside of your comfort zone? Is it that you put yourself in a difficult situation? Maybe you've got social anxieties and you're at a party. Maybe it's something that's just crept into your life. Maybe it's a host of different little things that are interconnecting to leading you to feel the way that you do. And when you have that knowledge, it leaves you in an impassioned, you can be passionate, but mainly empowered position. Empowered, that's yes. The word, an empowered position where you can start to take those meaningful steps. And finally, the N of RAIN, nurture with self-compassion. Don't identify yourself with the thought or feeling. You are not the thought or emotion.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And for me, if we can start to properly use this little anagram, whenever we're feeling that discomfort, that will allow us to move again from denial to a place of ultimately acceptance when we're feeling those feelings, we're allowing them to be, and then we can take those next steps. We've got 2 more top tips for you before we end our live today. And the third stage for embracing acceptance and letting go and adopting an open and positive mindset is exactly what I just said there. We need to start to adopt an open and positive mindset. Challenge some of the thinking, perhaps, that might have led us to feeling uncomfortable. Start to rationalize. Consider accessing the wise mind. The wise mind. Actually, Neil, you might be best placed to talk about this.
Well, again, the wise mind is a really good tool. Hopefully, some of you will be aware of this, but sometimes we can connect with certain parts of our brain. If you consider your brain in 3 different sections, you kind of can from time to time, based on your thoughts and your feelings, connect with just one side of your brain, one being the emotional side, and everything that you do is based on the emotion. Then the other side is the rational side, and sometimes if you connect with the rational side, that's a good, but you also have to connect with the other side as well. And then when you can actually access the wise mind, you're probably working towards solutions that benefit you and give you growth rather than just connecting with one side of the brain. It's a big subject, and I actually quite enjoy telling people about the wise mind, because that's one key thing that helped me massively, because I've worked on my own self for quite a period of time, and I can identify straight away that a lot of my issues when I was becoming unwell was because I was connected with one side of my brain and one side of my brain only.
Exactly. Really well said there, Neil. And a lot of the time we can spend the time in our emotional brain, as we call it, where we're just locked into the feelings. We're not seeing the wood from the trees. We're not able to actually challenge our thoughts to a place where we're seeing things more realistically. And we need to allow ourselves to do that process by adopting an open and positive mindset. Things are rarely exactly the way that they think they are or they feel that they are. We need to allow ourselves to see things in a different light. And then finally, the fourth step would be solution-focused thinking. This in itself allows us to return hope, and it moves us towards an open and positive mindset. By adopting solution-focused thinking, we are taking the ethos that everything is figure-outable. And if we're,
you like that word,
I do. Everything is figure-outable. And if we, in not embracing acceptance and letting go, if we've got a closed negative mindset, we've already recognized that a lack of hope or a feeling for lack of hope for change can be an issue. With solution-focused thinking, we are saying there is hope. There are things that I can do. We are bringing the power back into our core, and we are putting ourselves in the driving seat.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know me too well, Neil.
Yes.
Putting ourselves back in the driving seat. So to recap, these, if you want a 4-step program for how it is that you can start to access these keys: identify signs that you're living with victim mentality, move from denial to a place of an awareness. 2, accept your emotions, allow yourself to sit in that realization. Don't let yourself be dictated back to that self-sabotage, these old patterns of behavior and thought which have so far kept you locked into your issues. 3, adopt an open and positive mindset. Challenge some of the thinking once those emotions are settling down. Bring it back to a more realistic appraisal of what's going on, where suddenly hope can return. And then finally, solution-focused thinking. Recognize some of the things that you can do and engage self-discipline to take you down that route. How does that sound, Neil?
Well said, Charlie. Very well said. So I think it's time to move on now. So thank you very much indeed, people. Hopefully you've got something out of that. We're just going to have a look to see if we had any comments. We didn't get any today, but I'm sure
we've had one.
Oh yes, one. Enjoy these videos. Cheers.
Thank you.
Obviously this will be posted on the Facebook page, so you can actually rewind, a bit like BBC iPlayer. So do have a look as and when you've got some time for yourselves. And goodbye and see you soon. And thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome. Thank you, Neil. Take care, guys, and we'll see you next Friday